Breaking news out of the WTA this morning. They have announced a brand new calendar and equal prize money in the future at all 500 and 1,000 events. By 2033, all events, but by 2027, all combined events will have the same prize money as what is offered on the ATP Tour for the WTA players. Now, you may be wondering, why announce this prize money thing and a new calendar at the same time? Aren't these completely separate things? Well, the answer is no. They're actually very related because for a long time, not all WTA 1000s were created equal. There were some WTA 1000s which were the same as ATP 1000s or ATP Masters events, where they were mandatory for all top 30 players, and the winner got 1,000 points, which kind of makes sense given the name, huh? There were other WTA 1000 events, which I put in air quotes, because they only offered 900 points, and they were technically non-mandatory, even though every top player would play. And at many of those WTA 1000 events that technically were not mandatory, prize money was not equal at these events. And that was a reason that was thrown out by event organizers as, the reason why equal prize money was not a thing at those events. That inequity, the fact that, the men it's an 1,000-point mandatory tournament, for the women not so much, that is why there is an inequity in prize money being distributed. And that always came across as just a very sorry excuse. The only excuse that actually would make sense here would be, look, the WTA is a separate organization that negotiates separate media rights deals and separate sponsorship deals. And because we get less revenue from the WTA, and that's why the players get paid less. That's the only acceptable reason to pay the athletes less. But the whole 900-point non-mandatory thing, it was kind of embarrassing, honestly. It was kind of embarrassing that was being used as an excuse. So the first thing is I'm glad that is no longer a thing, that there are going to be 10 WTA 1000 tournaments, and those 1000 tournaments will just be all the same 1,000-point tournaments that are mandatory. All right? Now, the other thing on the equal prize money front, though, that I do have my concerns about is that the benchmark for prize money is basically whatever the ATP pays. They have promised that whatever the ATP pays in prize money, that's what we'll pay. And from a business perspective, that's a very unconventional setup or a very unconventional promise, because, again, you just don't know what is going to happen to the ATP and the kind of revenue that they might be able to bring in versus the kind of revenue that you might be able to bring in. For example, this news broke this week, Daily Mail, that Saudi Arabia and the Public Investment Fund is in talks with the ATP to invest. And if they did invest, the ATP might get an influx of, $1 billion, $2 billion. This public investment fund, if you're a football/soccer fan, if you're a golf fan, you have already seen how much money they are willing to throw around. And if they throw some of that money at the ATP Tour, that is going to drastically change the depth of pocket that the ATP is dealing with. And all I'm saying is, if the ATP got that kind of investment and the WTA did not, And that kind of investment would enable the ATP to increase its prize money significantly. The WTA has basically said, like, yeah, we'll match it. And again, from a business standpoint, that's quite unconventional. That would be like if Burger King said that, well, whatever McDonald's pays, however many people McDonald's pays its employees, and whatever wages they pay for those employees, we are going to match that. And regardless of if McDonald's ends up selling more hamburgers and creating more revenue, Burger King is just like, yeah, we'll match it. We'll match it. I am happy for WTA players, and I believe they deserve equal prize money here. I'm rooting for them to get equal prize money. I want them to have that. I'm just concerned about the health of that organization, the WTA. Like, as a company, I'm a little bit concerned. It's highly unconventional from a business sense to say we're just going to match whatever this other organization pays in prize money. But as long as the WTA can afford to do it, then this is great. And I'll leave it at that. Now to the second part of this all, which is just the calendar being reformed and changing. And I actually do have my concerns in that area as well, but these concerns are not specific to the WTA Tour at all. This is, very kind of parallel to what the ATP has done. And it all comes down to expanding the Masters 1000s event to 2-week events. Now, things are a little bit different on the WTA side of things. In fact, the website has done this really awesome graphic that has kind of laid out the calendar. And one of the changes that you'll notice is February. In February, Doha and Dubai will both be actually 1 week long Masters 1000 events. There's also going to be another 1 week Masters in October. I shouldn't say Masters 1000, 1 week 1000 in October. Now, this year, or previously, Dubai and Doha had alternated years as a 1000. But this was another non-mandatory 1000. So Rybakina this year, after winning or making the final of the Australian Open, she said, I'm not going to play in February. I'm going to take this off. Sabalenka, after winning the Australian Open, she said, yeah, no, thank you. I'm going to rest. I want to rest. So neither of them played in February. That will now be out of the question. 2 mandatory 1000 events in February. Now we go to March. We get the Sunshine Double. In April, as you can see by this calendar, April is the only month of the year, besides the off-season month, December, where there is not either a major event, although the WTA Finals barely kind of counts because only 8 players play. But for the 8 players, that's significant. April is the only event where there is not either a major or a 1000. Remember, for the men, you can kind of flip-flop April and February. You could say February is that month, that off month for the men, but in April, there's Monte Carlo. Now, notably, Monte Carlo is not a mandatory event because the ATP at some point recognized that the stretch from March to September, basically from March, start of the Sunshine Double, to end of the U.S. Open, is absolutely insane if we do not make Monte Carlo optional. So they made Monte Carlo optional. I'm a little worried. Now, keep in mind, here's another big deal. In my last video about Casper Ruud, we talked about the Casper Ruud swing after Wimbledon. It is a month-long stretch. It's not just clay. It's also a stretch that I'll include Atlanta, Newport, Umag, Hamburg, DC, all these tournaments, plus Bostad, Stad, Kitzbühel, although Kitzbühel isn't there anymore, or at least it's not there this year. All of these events are over this 1 month long stretch after Wimbledon, where if you're a top player, usually you take off, you rest until Canada. which is huge because, again, March to the end of Wimbledon, that's a pretty tough stretch if you're a top player. You're playing a ton of tennis. But you make Canada a 2-week event. You make Cincinnati a 2-week event. And suddenly you've created that month-long break period where there's no 1000s. You now make that a 2-week period. Only 2 weeks. And incidentally, Vanch and Juan Ignacio were in my Twitter mentions this morning talking about this. So shout out to them and credit to them for getting this conversation kind of on my radar. That's insane. Now, 2025 is going to be when Montreal, Toronto, and Cincinnati are both going to expand to 2-week events. And look, I am looking at the calendar here. I'm just looking at this. Look, tennis was always long. But if you were a top player, there were built-in rests. You could take February off. You could really take a month off, second half of July, first half of August. You could take that time off, and you could just build in these little rest periods. These rest periods are going away. And I'm genuinely worried about the effects of that, the long-term effects of that, and if players are just going to be able to withstand this 11-month season where increasingly they basically have to either be playing or be on the road for pretty much the entire time. So those are my thoughts on everything we've seen from this breaking news this morning. WTA announcing a pathway to equal prize money by 2027/2033 and reforming the calendar. But shout out also to new WTA 500 events, Monterey, Seoul, Strasbourg. There's going to be more 500s. Brisbane is now a 500 event. And also there's going to be restrictions on top players and their ability to play 250s, which has kind of been a problem on the WTA tour recently, where the top players have just invaded the 250s. And then you have situations where, like, if you're ranked 50 in the world, you can't even get into an event. And that has gotten kind of out of hand. So the WTA has created a solution for that, which is good. If you want to figure out what the actual specifics of that are, you can pause the video right here and kind of read the new rules for 500s and 250s. But that is all I got. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.